by Chris, we have the Canonic Cautionary Tale of Biological Pollution, or And in His Ear I'll Holla, Mortimer!
Hi guys. Okay, so this guy is Isidore. He's a mid-1800s dude, started a organization called the Acclimatization Society of Paris. He was a zoologist. This is like the main crux of my thing, and I cannot say the word acclimatization very well. This is Eugene. Actually, this is Dr. Bliss. He was the private surgeon to President Garfield. I could not find a picture of Eugene Shefflin anywhere on the internet, so I just used a picture of Dr. Bliss instead. This is Shakespeare. We all know who he is. He wrote a bunch of poems and plays and stuff. Now, he's actually another key part of this whole thing, and I'll tie all these guys together in just a moment. That's a long 15 seconds. So, acclimatization societies, what these were groups of guys. They were almost always guys. They would get together and they decided that, hey, let's screw with nature. They would bring in animals that didn't belong to new places wherever they were. Most of this was done for aesthetics or nostalgia. One of my favorite examples of this was rabbits in Australia. 24 rabbits were brought into Australia, and within a few years they were so numerous that the Australians had to actually build a fucking fence across the entire country to keep them from taking over. Now, while acclimatization societies were all over the place, the one we're most concerned with is the American Acclimatization Society, based in New York City, and a lot of their releases and introductions were done in a new parcel of land called Central Park. In fact, one of their first releases was a bird called the sparrow. We didn't have a lot of those here before. They dealt with things like fishes and stuff, but most of the time they dealt with birds. The sparrow introduction was actually really successful, and within a few years sparrows were everywhere. This guy Eugene, he's a pharmacist, also a prominent member of the American Acclimatization Society. He says, hey, enough of covering New York in sparrows, let's do something even more grand, something more amazing. So he had what he thought was a brilliant idea. What if we took every single bird species, over 60 of them, every single bird species ever mentioned in any Shakespeare play, and introduced them all to Central Park? That would be amazing, that would be brilliant. And so they got started doing that. They started with a few different birds, thrushes, nightingales, skylarks, finches, things like that. And while they did okay, none of them actually thrived. They were living, they were hanging out, but they said, okay, let's go to something new. Let's try a new kind of bird. And so enters the starling. Now, the starling is only mentioned by Shakespeare once, in Henry IV, Part 1, but that was just enough for Eugene. In 1890, he released 60 of the birds. 1891, he released 40 more. And they didn't do too successfully at first. In fact, when they found the first nest in the eaves of the Museum of Natural History, they all got excited and had a good time. But starlings, when they do something, they go big. They can release up to 2 or 3 broods of babies a year. They're very aggressive. They'll lord it over any other birds in the area. They're very intelligent. Starlings are one of the few animals that have demonstrated tool use, and they can actually mimic the human voice almost as well as a parrot. Now, one interesting thing about starlings is they're legal to have as pets. Because they are imported birds, they are not covered under what's called the Migratory Bird Act, so you can have a starling in your home if you'd like to. They're high-energy birds, very curious, and they also are very annoying. This is a murmuration. Now, hordes of starlings will be in these groups, over thousands. While they look awesome, these can actually be very dangerous. In fact, in 1960, a plane flew through a bunch of these and was taken down, killed 62 people on board, and led the FAA to create what was called the minimum bird ingestion standards for planes flying overhead. Now, the starlings really took off. By 1928, they had reached Mississippi. By 1942, they had gone all the way to California. And by the 1950s, there were over 50 million starlings in the United States. This was out of control, so they tried to figure out ways to deal with these starlings and reduce their numbers. The Department of Agriculture actually suggested that people could eat them. If you put them in a pie, you could reduce some of the gamey taste of them. They also tried electrical wires, things like that. But none of these control options actually worked as well. From this original 100 birds, there are now over 200 million starlings in the United States. All over the place, they are the #1 most numerous bird in the country. Now, why did I talk about a bird for 5 minutes? Well, ecological disaster aside, let's take a lesson from Eugene. You take a crazy idea, a bit of cash, and a bit of drive, it shows that you have the potential for unimaginable success. You also have the chance for astounding and unparalleled disaster, the likes of which the world has never seen. But hey, to hell with that. Go release some birds.